Well, it's that time again. Time to read more. It is now time for episode 6. Back reads A People's History of American Empire. So sit down, relax, and enjoy the series. Welcome to episode 6 of Zach Reads A People's History of American Empire by Howard Zinn and a few others. And also thank you to my dear friend Nicholas, known on YouTube as Turles. Thank you also, brother, for recommending this to me. So I left off on page 121. This is the chapter on World War II, A People's War, chapter 6. So I read a little bit of it in my last video, so I wanted to get back onto the reading here. So got 20 more pages left. But the good news is with this with me recording off of OBS, I can basically record as long as I want. I don't have to worry about running out of storage on my phone, and I have to go, try to limit the time or whatever. No, I'm probably not gonna record videos off my phone now that I have OBS. At least I'm not gonna do it for the foreseeable future. But anyways, hope you all enjoy. So, December 7th, 1941, Japan bombed the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor. Our government said it was a sneak attack, but the records show that a White House conference 2 weeks before it had anticipated a war with Japan, Germany's ally. Months before Pearl Harbor, President Franklin Roosevelt misled the public about confrontations between U.S. warships and German submarines, asserting that the subs had launched unprovoked attacks. In fact, the U.S. had been waging an undeclared war with Germany in the North Atlantic. Oh, of course. Under the March 1941 Lend-Lease program, the U.S. became an arsenal of democracy. Yeah, the spreaders of democracy, all right. To protect British and American military shipments to Russia and Britain in violation of the Neutrality Act. Oh, this is when we were aligned with Russia, right? Yeah. Yeah, this is when. Thomas A. Bailey, a historian sympathetic to FDR, wrote that Roosevelt repeatedly deceived the American public. He was like the physician who must tell the patient lies for the patient's own good. Huh. Mexico, 1846, Cuba, 1898, Philippines, 1899, Vietnam, 1964. Many of our wars were launched on the quicksand of public deception, and especially Iraq, 2003. Oh, yeah, that was a real doozy. The U.S. did not always see Germany's Nazi government as its enemy. That's true. It had joined England and France in appeasing German dictator Adolf Hitler throughout the 30s. Yes, they did. Oh, kind of like what we're doing with Nazis right now in Ukraine against Russia. But yeah, that's a whole nother topic that's separate for another, of course, for my streams and my videos and stuff. But other videos, of course. But yeah, that's the past. This is the present. Yeah, we sure didn't learn our history. 1934, a Senate resolution objecting to the German treatment of Jews was buried in committee at the request of the State Department. Anti-lynching laws were filibustered in the Senate. No wonder black Americans looking at anti-Semitism in Germany that year did not see their own situation as much different. Yeah, exactly. Oh, state-sanctioned racism here in the U.S., state-sanctioned racism against Jews in Germany. Yeah, what's the difference? There was widespread support for the war, but also widespread war profiteering. Of course. Wages were rising, but the profits were skyrocketing. In 1941, there were over 4,000 strikes in the U.S., more than any other time since 1919. So at that time, it was at like a 20-year high at that point. Workers rebelled by striking and sometimes were put down with force. FDR had troops seize the mines during a 1943 strike, infuriating United Mine Workers President John L. Lewis. During World War II, a smaller proportion of men resisted the draft than in World War One, but 6,000 went to prison 3 times more than World War One. I hate the fucking draft. It is so anti-human and is so tyrannical. Do not support it. Should be outlawed. Should be unconstitutional. With so many white workers in the military unions enrolled, 1.25 million new African American workers, twice the pre-war number. Some white workers resisted and engaged in hate strikes. In 1943, 25,000 Packard workers struck over the promotion of just 3 black workers. One white worker said, I'd rather see Hitler and Tara win than work beside a, I'm not going to say that word. In 1944, after one, well, basically, this was a very, very state sanctioned racist time. There were workers protesting, black people working with white people and segregation. That was the thing. In 1944, after orders of to ignore safety standards led to an explosion that killed 320 of their comrades, black sailors at Port Chicago near San Francisco defied their white officers by refusing to load munitions. The newspaper said 8 killed in new Navy blast. 50 sailors faced trial for mutiny in the Chicago Defender at that time. Despite racism and abuse, African Americans persisted in helping the war effort. Take, for example, the case of Dr. Charles Drew, who saved untold thousands of lives by inventing blood banks. In 1939, Dr. Drew invented a method to preserve blood plasma, the liquid that carries blood cells, so it could be stored and shipped over long distances. Early in the war, the British asked Drew to supervise the Blood for Britain campaign. As Nazi warplanes bombed London, there was a shortage of blood to treat the wounded. Drew invented bloodmobiles, refrigerated trucks that are still used today. In 1941, after the success of the British program, Drew took over the American Red Cross blood bank in New York. He organized a massive blood drive for the U.S. Army and Navy. Dr. Drew, the military demands that you segregate the blood by race and refuse all black donors. That's ridiculous. Blood types don't differentiate by race. Damn right. Drew was fired from the blood service, a shameful concession to segregationists in the military. Well, segregationists have no place in the military because there's no use for them. Because they're bigots and they're scumbags. They always were, and anybody that is a segregationist is a bigot and always will be. Fuck them. They have no place in our fucking military serving our country. Absolutely not. They have no place. One U.S. policy came close to a direct duplication of fascism. FDR signed Executive Order 9066, authorizing the arrest of every Japanese, 110,000 men, women, and children on the West Coast without warrants or hearings. See, as bad as Japan was at that time, imperialist Japan, for U.S. policy to be bigoted against innocent Japanese people that had nothing to do with this is just was just discriminatory, was wrong, was bigoted. That's state sanctioned bigotry against Japanese people. Unacceptable, wrong, horrible. 3/4 of those rounded up were Nazi born U.S. citizens. I say born in Japan were barred from citizenship. Again, that's fucked. Western Defense Command and 4th Army Wartime Civil Control Administration. Basically, it was like basically this right here was a poster saying this is instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry. In 1989, the government officially apologized and distributed 1.6 billion to interns and their relatives. But I wondered, was internment a mistake or was it a continuation of the worst elements of the American system? No, I think it was the latter. In fact, I asked myself, Could all these things be expressions of the United States' own imperial ambitions? Yes, 100%. Behind the war headlines, U.S. diplomats and businessmen worked hard to make sure that when the war ended, American power would be second to none in the world. The open door policy would be extended from Asia to Europe, meaning the U.S. intended to push England aside and replace it with an empire of its own. Yes, exactly. So then, what happened? They became our ally after 1940. Yeah. And then the Soviet Union would become, well, then after that Nazi Germany would be the new enemy. Then after that the Soviet Union would then become the enemy. See how it works? That's how the US imperialist system works. Just just like boom boom just like that. You got one over the other. There you have it. In 1945, a State Department officer observed petroleum has historically played a larger part in the external relations of the U.S. than any other what is it? Commodity, rather. Yeah. Aramco, Saudi Arabian oil company, got FDR to agree to wartime aid to the Saudis, creating a U.S. presence in the kingdom and a military shield for the House of Saud. Oh, yes. That's how we became friends with the medieval kingdom of Saudi Arabia that was living in its own horrible times then. They were living in their own dark age times then. They still are today. A weakened Great Britain agreed in 1944 to share the oil with the U.S. on the principle of equal opportunity and friendship. In private, however, FDR wanted to make sure that the U.S. empire would be more equal than Britain's. Oh, so meaning that we would be an empire still, but we would be equal. Yeah. With victory imminent, heads of state Winston Churchill in Britain, Roosevelt, and Joseph Stalin, he was one of ours, of course. Oh, man. At the February 1945 Yalta Conference to discuss post war spheres of influence and other plans, each had its own agenda. Among other things, Roosevelt wanted greater U.S. control over oil in the Middle East. Yeah, we wanted those countries' oil and resources. After the conference, FDR entertained King Saud with his entourage of two sons, a prime minister, an astrologer, and a flock of sheep aboard a U.S. cruiser near Egypt. It was a productive meeting. Oh, wow, very productive meeting. Yeah, you come to our side, we'll give you the oil, and we'll control the oil. We'll control your oil, and you do something for us. Ensuring that the U.S. has a secure supply of oil, American businesses could now penetrate areas that have been dominated by England. So that's what happened at Abu Ghraib. They just wanted to penetrate areas. Yeah, you see? Yeah, I know that's fucked. Well, now we know they just wanted to penetrate those areas. Give them a break. Okay, I gotta stop. That's fucked. Yes, I have a very fucked sense of humor. Before the war was over, the administration was planning the outlines of a new international economic order based on a partnership between governments and big businesses. More and more, it seemed that World War II had been waged by a government whose chief beneficiary was a wealthy elite. As early as 1941, three-quarters of the value of military contracts were handled by 56 large corporations. A U.S. Senate study of economic concentration reported that of the 1 billion spent in World War II, 400 million went to 10 large corporations. This meant that from this point on, war would never end for the defense industry, otherwise known as the military industrial complex. Stay classy. New weapons had to be developed to keep the contracts going. Yeah, it was a business for the warmongers. The warmongers with the D's and the R's at the end of their names. After the war was won, but before it was formally concluded, the emboldened American empire decided to flex its muscle by testing new weapons on defenseless populations. And so it began. But I was just following orders, sir. 3 weeks before the end of the war, I was abruptly awakened by at 1 a.m. Zen, get up. We've got another mission. We've been ordered to bomb a little town near Bordeaux called Royan. France? The war is over in France. A few thousand German soldiers are holed up near Royan and waiting for the war to end. We've been ordered to take them out. Before we took them out, we learned that we would be carrying a new weapon. What the hell are those? Barrels of something called sticky fire. It burns everything it touches. During the Vietnam War, it was called napalm. Oh, yeah. Otherwise known as what that was called Agent Orange. And what the U.S. did in Vietnam, basically causing crippling injuries and disabilities to civilian populations during the Vietnam War. Absolutely disgusting. And it actually enrages me and makes me sick to my stomach what they did to those populations, basically resulting in crippling disabilities and sickness to children. Absolutely disgusting. Yeah, yeah. If you ever wonder why these people in some of these countries hate the U.S., they pretty much have a good reason to. I certainly don't blame them. As an American, I certainly don't blame them. There were 12,000 flying fortresses over Royan that day. We dropped 396,000 gallons of napalm on the town. Both German soldiers and French civilians were killed. That actually was one other thing. They also used this against Korea when against North Korea when North Korea was trying to reclaim South Korea back in 1950 when North Korea tried to reunify the country, which the U.S. was responsible for that, especially because they were colonized because Korea was colonized by Japan. Japan lost Korea in World War II, and then the country was split between the U.S. puppet government in the South and the Soviet backed country in the North. And then in 1950, they tried to reunify the country. But of course, the U.S. empire did not like that. It was threatened by that. Its influence in that area was threatened. So what did they do? They started the Korean War and dropped. Actually, it was like I was around 1 million gallons of napalm. Million gallons. At least 50% of Korean villages were half obliterated by this. And there were 3 years of fighting from 1950 to 53, and there still isn't a peace treaty. Yeah, that's just a little lesson about what the U.S. has been doing with fucking napalm. Pretty horrific, I know. After the war, I read a newspaper about that day. 350 civilians crawled from the ruins and said the attack was such hell that we never believed it was possible. I remembered what the attack had looked like from the air as they hit the earth. The drums of sticky fire ignited briefly like matches flaring. We saw no people, heard no screams, saw no blood, no torn limbs. I was just following orders. It is the ancient cry of the warrior who had committed atrocities, and is no defense in a war crimes tribunal. In our last three missions, our cargo was packed of food. We dropped them on Dutch cities because the Germans had blown up the dikes. On our final trip, as we turned away from Amsterdam, a crew called over the intercom. Hey, Howard, look down below. It was a message written in tulips, a reminder of what millions of people had accomplished when they joined together to defeat fascism. Well, yeah, they did defeat fascism. But here's the kicker, though, that the fascists were on our side at one point. Yeah, except they were and then they weren't. After V and E Day, victory in Europe, my crew flew back across the Atlantic on a battered B 17, Bale of the Bow. I thought the tail gunner would fought despite his doubts about the war. At the time, I wasn't convinced by what he said, but I was troubled by it, and I never forgot it. In World War II, which many of us saw as a war, against the racism of the Nazis. The hands of the United States were not clean. Our government had accepted and was still accepting the subordination of black people in what we had claimed was a democratic society. Lieutenant, get him out of here until I finish. I didn't realize what extent my mind was changing during the war. When I got home and was putting my stuff together, I collected some photos, old navigation logos, and some other mementos. My air medal and ribbons with two battle stars. Never again. The atomic age, August 6, 1945, 8:15 a.m., Hiroshima, Japan. In a blinding flash, a city of 250,000 was reduced to rubble, leaving 100,000 dead and another 100,000 wounded. From the burning homes, so many cried from that individual voices could not be heard. President Harry Truman had made the decision to drop America's newest weapon, the atomic bomb, on the civilian populations of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, at the largest hospital in Hiroshima. Most of the doctors and nurses were dead. 10,000 patients arrived, stepping over corpses in search for help. The doctors disposed of the piles of dead by cremating the corpses. X-ray film exposed by the bomb blasts, which discarded the remaining envelopes, were used to store the ashes of the dead. The envelopes were labeled and stacked near a makeshift religious shrine. As the days passed, starving survivors. Yeah, this is going to be a big graphic just in case some of you guys, like, if any of you are squeamish. I don't know. I mean, I would assume most of you guys are not that squeamish, but just in case. As the days passed, starving survivors raided local gardens. They collected bomb roasted pumpkins, still in the vine, and dug up potatoes, baked by the heat of the blast. Japan formally surrendered. But wait, they ate the potatoes, I think. Did they? Yeah, yeah, they must have. Yeah, they did. Oh, yeah, I see one of them here. Look like, wow. I don't think they were really worried about that. Japan formally surrendered on September 2nd, 1945. Why did we drop the bomb on Hiroshima? Truman claimed. The world will note that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, a military base. That was because we wished in the first attack to avoid, insofar as possible, the killing of civilians. Oh, so you wanted to avoid the killing of civilians by killing civilians. Oh, I see. Oh, I see your logic. Yeah, yeah, that's the imperialist logic here. That was a preposterous statement. The 100,000 killed were almost all civilians. So did we drop bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki because too much money and effort had been invested in an atomic bomb not to drop it? Or was it because we knew the Russians were set to invade Japan? Also, this is when the Soviet Union was starting to become the enemy. Right. Dropping the bomb first meant that Japan would not surrender to the U.S., not the Russians, and the U.S. would be the occupier of post-war Japan. Oh, so we wanted to do it. Got it. British scientist P.M.S. Blackett suggested in his book Fear, War, and the Bomb. The dropping of the bomb was the first major operation of the Cold diplomatic war with Russia. Yeah, and so it began. America rejoiced at the end of the war with Japan, but we did not know at what cost. Hiroshima was our atrocity. When dazed, burning civilians, their flesh hanging. Yeah, this is fucking. I don't know if I should read this. It's a big graphic. I just don't want to be too graphic, just because I don't want to not like worried what you guys will think, just because I don't want YouTube to fuck with this with anything on my channel or anything that I'm showing you guys. So I'm just gonna kind of uh, look over that. We'll look over that in terms of the book here. But yeah, yeah, obviously this is the effect of war. It's horrible what it does to civilians. We had redefined the cost efficiency of killing beyond the imagination of anyone, anywhere. The bombing was a warning to the Soviet Union to stay out of Japan. Now half the globe was under new management. The CIA, exactly. Administration of the new empire was entrusted to local elites when they failed or rebelled. The problem was turned over to U.S. intelligence. Historian what is it? Arnold Toynbee. America is today the leader of a worldwide anti-revolutionary movement in the defense of vested interests supporting the rich against the war. Uh, uh, the leader of a worldwide anti-revolutionary movement. Yeah, yeah, okay. I had to read that over again, but yeah, that is true because no, we don't like revolution, especially when it threatened our hegemony. China, 1949 or 45 to 49, the U.S. used defeated Japanese soldiers to fight Mao Zedong, a wartime ally against fascism. Yes, using defeated soldiers as human shields. Yeah, that was such a great thing to do. Greece, 1947 to 49, in a civil war, the U.S. interfered on the side of the neo-fascists to defeat the Greek left who had fought the Germans in World War II. Yeah, and fast forward about 20 years later, Henry Kissinger did the same thing in Turkey, in Greece, and in Cyprus. In Greece, yeah, he interfered again. Philippines, 1946 to 54, back in its old colony, the U.S. helped defeat a pro-communist peasant uprising called the Bahuk Rebellion, led by anti-Japanese resistant fighter Louis Turok. Guatemala, 1954, the CIA overthrew the elected government and it appropriated some uncultivated land belonging to the United Fruit Company. This is U.S. imperialism in a nutshell. And in my next video, I'm going to be discussing the latest piece of American imperialism in Argentina. So buckle up, that's going to be a good one. The Cold War would develop into a furious nuclear arms race over ideology, the capitalism of the US versus the communism of the Soviet Union. It would last for over 40 years. It kept it to keep it going required political and social repression on both sides. Yeah, that was very true. Even as a socialist, I can say that, yeah, there was repression in the Soviet Union back then. Like, let's just call a spade, obviously. Soviet leader Joseph Stalin continued his Stalinist system, which he initiated in the 30s to purge, imprison, and murder anyone considered disloyal. Instead, a reign of terror. Truman raised the the specter of Stalinist communism to create a climate of fear in order to steeply escalate the military budget after World War II. 1947, Truman ordered the Justice Department to produce a list of totalitarian, fascist, communism, or subversive organizations. He required all federal employees to take loyal oaths, move quickly, emulated in the private sector, membership in, and even sympathetic association with any organization on the list was deemed subversive. In this atmosphere, Senator Joseph McCarthy would launch his communist witch hunt that would lead to Inquisition style hearings of public and private citizens, red baiting, and other repressive measures used in the past to ensure compliance with the status quo. Reach down from the halls of power into nearly every aspect of American society, including popular culture, but the seeds of dissension had already been planted among young people. Their behavior threatened the cultural foundations of the Cold War. They wanted to dance. And with that, Chapter 7, The Cool War, that will basically discuss the information going on with the Cold War. That will be the next one, pages 141 to 150. So, hope y'all enjoyed this reading. Hope y'all enjoyed. Hope you all learned something. I certainly learned quite a bit from it. And hope you all enjoyed. And stay tuned for the next episode of the Global Report with Zach the Sully's Guy. Look out for it, including my stream tomorrow at 7 p.m. Got a lot to talk about for sure. One thing that's crazy I'm going to be talking about as well. Anyway, stay tuned for the next one. Until next time, stay safe, stay well, stay classy. This is Zach the Celtic Guy, the fellow, your anti-imperialist guy up in here. This guy reporting. See y'all in the next one. Keep fighting, keep on rocking. Till next time, peace out and so on.